finished it. And then he dies. Then Solara leaves the compound headed home, she says. Now what you saw there is the ending that was in the movie and the ending that everybody saw in theaters, but it's not the ending that was originally written. I learned this when I was doing research last few weeks. Originally, Solara takes with her one of the Bibles they printed when she leaves. She has her own mission. She's not just going home. At some point in the movie, Solara becomes more than just a tag-along who knows where the water's kept. She becomes Eli's first disciple, whether he realizes it or not. And I can imagine being Eli and being in that city with Carnegie and everything that happened in there and all of the drama and he almost died a few times, like all of that. And he's thinking, why? If you said you had a path for me, why did you lead me through this? He might not have seen it, but it was for Solara. Because Solara's in that town and she is going to be the next mission. You're going to do your job, and then you're going to die. And Solara's going to take that mission, and she's going to run with it. We don't see God's purposes in the valleys sometimes, but He's there, and He's got one. Catch what the curator told Solara as she was leaving. You don't have to leave, he said. You're perfectly safe here. My fear is that too many of us are staying in the safety of Alcatraz prison. The problem with that is that Christianity was never intended to be a safe religion. Anybody who tells you otherwise is either lying to you or just mistaken, sadly. Some of you will recognize this picture when it comes up. As Da Vinci's Last Supper. Most of you know how this man died, Judas. All of you hopefully will know how this man, Jesus, died, but was raised back to life. But what about the other 11 guys in the picture? How did the rest of the disciples live their lives, and how did they die? Bartholomew said that Bartholomew preached the gospel of Christ to India and translated the gospel of Matthew into their language. He was beaten, crucified, and beheaded. James, the son of Alphaeus, tradition tells us he was thrown from the temple, pretty high up, thrown from the temple by the scribes and the Pharisees. Then he was stoned and beaten to death with a club. Andrew, who was Peter's brother, was crucified. The interesting part is what led to his crucifixion. Essentially, scribes and the Pharisees came to him and said, "You are not allowed to talk about this Jesus anymore. If you do, we'll kill you." Not only did he continue doing that, not only did he continue preaching and teaching people about Jesus, he said this, "I would not have preached the honor and glory of the cross if I feared the death of it." Essentially, they told Andrew, "If you keep preaching about Jesus, we're going to kill you and crucify you." And he said, "Cool, how about over there?" Peter, Andrew's brother, the Apostle Peter, tradition says, was condemned to death during the first persecution of Christians under the Emperor Nero. Some say he escaped, but it is generally known that as he was leaving, he saw Jesus coming towards him on the road when he got to the gate of Jerusalem. And Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" And Jesus said, "I am coming again to be crucified." That's when it clicked for Peter. That's when he finally got it. Jesus died for me. And I'm bailing on him, so now he's got to do it again. Peter turned around, went back to the city, and was crucified. Upside down. Because he wasn't worthy, he said, of being crucified like Jesus was. The second persecution under Domitian, the emperor, exiled John here to the island of Patmos, where he wrote the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. John died an old man, and as far as we know, is the only apostle who was not martyred. Good for him. But they tried. They tried to martyr him. Before he was exiled, they boiled him alive, trying to kill him, and he lived through it. Legend says he was singing praise the whole time. So out of fear, they exiled him. Thomas, doubting Thomas. Who doesn't know the story about Thomas? I will not believe it is you, Lord, until I touch the wounds in your hand and the wounds in your side. Thomas preached all over the Middle East, everywhere. About half a dozen people groups. Then he was killed in Kalamina, which is near Madras in India. James, son of Zebedee. James had a critic who wanted him murdered. Sometimes Christians disagree on things. James and this other guy disagreed on something seriously enough that this other guy turned him in as a Christian and had him killed. The critic betrayed him a lot like Jesus, or like Judas betrayed Jesus. And at some point, when James was being led to his execution, he had a conversation with this man who repented and declared himself a Christian in full view of the authorities. James forgave him, and they were crucified and beheaded together. Philip, after years of preaching to nations, Philip was stoned, crucified, and buried with his daughter. Matthew, the guy who wrote the book of Matthew, wrote this gospel to the Jews in the Hebrew language, and after he had preached the gospel in Ethiopia and Egypt, the king had sent someone to kill him by spearing him to the ground and beheading him. Jude. According to tradition, Jude taught in Armenia, Syria, and Persia, where he was martyred. Tradition tells us that he was buried in Karakalisa, which is now modern-day Iran. Finally, Simon. Simon was crucified in Egypt. These 11 men changed the world because they believed in something strongly enough to die for it. Like, Andrew was virtually happy. He was virtually grateful for his death. He was looking forward to it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who, if you don't know him, was a theologian and a martyr himself in the middle of Nazi Germany, said it well when he said this: when Christ calls a man, he calls him to come and die. Jesus says, pick up your cross and follow me. Pick up your cross and follow me doesn't mean getting a cross tattooed on your arm or wearing a t-shirt that says, Jesus is my homeboy, or putting a fish on the back of your car. None of those things are bad. Those are all cool things to do. It's fine. But that's not picking up your cross and following him. What it means to be a disciple is to go the way Jesus went. To give your life for what he gave his life for, which is the glory of God and the good of others and the church. Would the church have advanced nearly as far as it has in these 2,000 years if these 11 men did not die for the cause? Or if they weren't willing to die for the cause? Would anything good ever happen if people are unwilling to die for anything? This September is the 30th anniversary of the Terry Fox Marathon of Hope. Terry believed in his mission enough to risk his life. I don't know if he was a Christian or not, but the question is the same. Would Terry Fox have had the same impact on Canada and Canadians if he'd made it? If he'd stopped in BC like he planned on it? And not if he was forced to stop in Thunder Bay?